Good morning and welcome to this very exciting session that's going to focus on unleashing a new green revolution, delivering food security, climate resilience, and poverty alleviation with root and tuber crops in Africa. It is being hosted in partnership with the International Potato Center and the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture. That's two centers of the CGIAR. So we are really excited about this conversation, and hopefully we will all engage, and we have an exciting session ahead of us. So I'm gonna say in Swahili, jambo and karibu, and let us really get engaged. I will start by inviting our Director General of the International Potato Center, Dr. Simon Heck, to officially welcome you and give some framing remarks.
Thank you very much, and good morning, and welcome all to this session on the RTB crops and what we quite ambitiously call a new green revolution. I'm Simon Heck from SIP, based in Lima, Peru. I've worked with SIP in Africa for many years, so for me this is very much at the core of what the CGIAR's ambition is. I would like to recognize the presence of many important people here and thank also the World Food Prize Foundation and the organizers of the Borlaug Dialogue for hosting this session. We have important visitors and guests and participants from around the world, really. There are our CGIAR leaders. We have other partners from institutions in Europe, Asia, and Africa who are working as scientists and as policymakers, as development practitioners on roots and tuber crops. So welcome all. This is an important day, as we realize, in the context of this week. This afternoon, we will celebrate our new laureates. And what a better way to start the day than recognizing the importance of agroecological biodiversity by paying attention to root, tuber, and banana crops in Africa and in other parts of the world. We know that these crops are important today. In many regions. We know as scientists working on these crops, and many of you have excellent careers in this respect, what the advantages, what the value of the crops are in the context of climate change, nutrition requirements, economic development. So we are here to also convince others and to really rally around a new agenda for roots, tubers, and bananas. If we look at some of the numbers of their current importance, we know that about 15% of the world's food comes from roots, tubers, and banana crops. We know that in more than 20 countries in Africa, more than half of food security depends on roots, tubers, and bananas. Similarly, in Southeast Asia and in the Pacific, by the way, we have the same reliance on these crops. We also know that over the last 20 years, globally, the production of these crops has increased by about 30%, and that in Africa it has more than doubled in the last 20 years. We also then look at ourselves and say, well, this actually happened with some support from science and innovation, but in absence of a very large and systematic initiative to support the productivity of these crops. The green revolution that took place, thankfully, for other crop groups like the cereals did not take place for root, tuber, and bananas. In spite of that, we see this growth and this momentum. It's mainly based on area expansion. It's mainly based on new farmers adopting old varieties in circumstances and in agroecologies for which these were not grown. That's the situation today. If we look into the future, what we also see is that much more will be expected from these crops. Not just more food, but food grown more efficiently in terms of resource use and in regenerative ways that responds to the needs of the planet as well as to the needs of the market. To achieve that, on the other hand, we know that a step change is required. Studies from FAO and the World Resources Institute indicate that to feed the world's population from the current agricultural land, root and tuber crops need more than double their productivity gains every year as compared to the progress in productivity gains we have made in the last 20 years, meaning we need really hit the accelerator on productivity. We also need to realize that the economic value of agricultural production will likewise depend more and more on roots and tuber crops under climate change. Studies by IFPRI and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation indicate that in Africa, more than half of new economic value in dollar terms by 2050 will come from roots, tubers, and bananas. That's a fairly surprising scenario, and it's definitely different from the image we've had in mind over the last 20 years, right? So that again says we need to step up our commitment as scientists, as policymakers, as investors, to pay attention to roots and tuber crops, because this is where the value will be generated. I'm very glad to have today the opportunity to witness a panel discussion from representative of research policy, investors, banks, and international partners that will speak to that, right? What we need, we believe, is a new partnership, a new coalition on a science-based approach to increasing the productivity, yes, but also the overall economic and social value of roots and tuber crops in Africa and beyond. So with these few words, ladies and gentlemen, welcome again. I also recognize now the presence of some World Food Prize laureates. Jan Lowe is here. Jan, always welcome, one of the pioneers on one of the sweetest of the roots and tuber crops. We will always welcome your inputs. Joyce, if you allow me to hand back to you to welcome the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. I realize I didn't introduce myself as your moderator. I'm Joyce Maru. I'm the Regional Director for Africa at the International Potato Center. So we will have a keynote from Dr. Martin Fregene, who is the Director of Agriculture and Agro-Industry at the African Development Bank. So Martin, we give you about 4 minutes to give us a keynote on root and tuber crops in Africa.
Joyce, you're giving me an impossible task. 4 minutes for a guy who spent 20 years breeding cassava. Anyway, good morning, colleagues. It's nice to see all of you. Good morning, DGs. Dr. Adeshina was supposed to give this speech, and I'm sure he will never do it in 4 minutes. You will have to give him 10. But I'm glad that, I'm sorry he's not able to be with us this morning. He actually is attending to 2 heads of states he has invited. So I've been asked to speak on 4 topics, 1 minute each. The first one is aligning national and regional policies for root and tuber crops. The second one is mobilizing technology. The third is mobilizing resources, and the third is fostering innovation. So on national policies, I can tell you that if any crops needs national policies, root and tuber crops needs national policies. Governments need to invest in multiplication of vines of sweet orange fresh sweet potatoes, stems of cassava, because it's bulky. Have you tried planting a hectare of cassava? You need a truck to carry the stems. For a hectare of maize, you need a small bag. Dr. Kim can tell you that, yeah. So you need the policies, first of all, for multiplication, because it takes a lot of effort. Secondly, for support to farmers on extension. Farmers need to, there's so many good things, and IIT knows that. So many good technologies, but farmers are still getting 9 tons, 10 tons. Just the planting density is wrong. A particular application, some farmers believe that you kill cassava when you apply fertilizer. So you need national policies. Also, you need access to markets. Root and tuber crops is one. Every 3 years, there's a cycle of boom and bust in prices, simply because farmers tend to overproduce and then draw back when the prices fall. So you need policies, both on the regional level. You need to be able to move one variety across a region, not have to repeat the whole process of varietal release. So you need to harmonize national release at the national and the regional level. It's very, very important. So that's 1 minute for the first one. I have to go on now. For the second one, mobilizing technology, I want to thank you all for the work you're doing through the Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation. It's the bank and Dr. Additional's bold effort to take things off the shelf, put it in the hands of farmers. It's wrong for only 30% of African farmers to have improved varieties in their field, even those closest to the research stations. So TAT has done three things. First of all, bulk crop seed. I'm happy the IITA, the DGs here, your semi-autotropic system for bulking cassava seeds has been very, very successful. Same also with orange flesh sweet potatoes. The second thing TAT is doing is extension. Just train the trainers so that they can go out there. The third thing is policies, trying to harmonize regionals. And they have done very well. More than 2 million farmers have received new orange flesh sweet potatoes, have received new cassava varieties. On the third thing, which is mobilizing resources, I have to tell you, DG, the most important money is with the private sector, not with us, not with the development banks. We only have 7% of the $36 billion required every year to change agriculture in Africa. So we have to de-risk what the private sector is investing. That's why we are setting up a $600 million facility to de-risk for suppliers of inputs and other financial institutions that can lend to the private sector. We have to de-risk for the private sector. Otherwise, it will be difficult to move things forward. Cassava can become a big crop across the continent, both for value added and many other things, even orange flesh sweet potatoes. But the private sector needs to be confident, comfortable to invest. The last thing is fostering innovation. This is where I will stop. You know, when I think of cassava, I spent 15 years at SEAD working as a cassava breeder. When I think of cassava, I think of people like Kazuo Kawano. I think of Claire Hershey. I think of people like Reinhard Howler. These guys created the revolution you see in Nigeria on cassava. Cassava was the backwater crop in Nigeria, but today it's probably the most important staple. It's always there when every other thing fails. They created the revolution in Thailand. So the question is, who is the next generation that will help this? And we have to fund that generation. I know our president met with the CGIR leaders on Tuesday, and he spoke about that. We have to invest in R&D of the root and tuber crops. Because if you look at maize or look at rice, and the number of breeders and number of agronomists you have in those crops, it's nothing compared to. Anyway, I can see she's already giving me a sign. So thank you very much. It was nice talking to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. That was just like speed dating, but you did very, very well. Right, so we move on to the next session. I'm going to invite my panelists to the front to please come to the front. They know themselves. Please come and take a seat, and we can continue the conversation. I'll introduce you as we move along. Thank you. Yeah. Do you want me to sit here or to be at the end? It's free sitting. Huh? Yeah. Thank you. So, and thank you for honoring our invitation to speak on this topic. So I'll start with Professor Ademola Adenli, who is the Senior Special Advisor on Agricultural Innovation in the Ministry of Agriculture in Nigeria. So, Professor, what would you like to say to us about root and tuber crops in 3 minutes?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. Obviously, the first question I'll ask is, what kind of contribution do root and tuber crop make to food security in the face of growing population and climate change? As you all know, they are very rich in carbohydrate, and they serve as source of major energy for population in Africa. For example, cassava provide over half of calorie intake for 200 million people in Nigeria, right? In terms of nutrition security. Sweet potato are very rich in vitamin A. They can tackle malnutrition problem, tackle hunger problem. Economic importance. You can see that the majority of the smallholder grow root and tubers, and they provide they contribute to rural income. In fact, they provide the income stream for women who dominate the value chain, such as cassava processing. Resilience to climate change. Many root and tubers are drought tolerant, and they can stand harsh conditions. So making them more important for food system in the region that are prone to climate variability. Then you're now talking, what kind of policy do you have in Nigeria? There are a wide range of policy. The National Root Crop and Research Institute in Nigeria, under the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, it has been engaged in R&D program for development of high-yielding variety, climate resilient variety, even biofortified variety with focus on potato to enrich them with iron and zinc to tackle food security problem and hunger. And one of the things we've been doing again is we have what they call HARTEP, that is a root and crops expansion program. So the whole idea is to help farmer gain access to market. First, we start the input, right? And we target the farmer with cultivate less than 2 hectares of land. So what we do is we aggregate their farm produce under cluster unit, and then we link them to the farmer. And I'm sure you are aware of the fact that there has been partnership between African Development Bank and the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security in Nigeria, where they have contributed about over $520 million on the special agro-industrial processing. So the whole idea is to develop value chain for strategic crop, including cassava. So by creating new market opportunity for cassava processing and improving their farmer profitability. So government has been working in collaboration with other donors to ensure that farmers are able to increase the level, because if you look at the average yield of cassava in Nigeria, it's about 8 tons per hectare, compared to global average of 11 tons per hectare. How can we increase productivity? We need innovation. Innovation is actually central to this sort of initiative we're pushing. So now I've been strategic in terms of policy formulation and implementation within the Ministry of Agriculture to harness innovation that could help increase root and tuber crops productivity within the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just one more. I want to come back a bit on that to ask you. In Nigeria and in general, Western Africa, do you think that these crops are sufficiently being prioritized in terms of national policies and strategies and mobilizing resources to supporting the scaling up of these crops?
I think there is more needs to be done. Apart from cassava, yam is actually very important for food transformation system. But there is not enough attention being paid to that. If you look at it, over 500 million growing yam country depend on yam value chain for livelihood and food security, right? As part of root and tuber crops, it is projected that root and tuber crop, particularly yam, will increase from 1 million ton to 53 million ton by year 2050 per capita consumption. So that means you need to strengthen, the post-harvest technology system. You need to improve processing. And that is one of the ways they can actually be integrated into global value chain. So for that to happen, government needs to invest in research and development, because as a percentage of GDP, African country invest an average of 0.2% compared to OECD country about 2.2%. So we're probably not doing enough. We need to step up when it comes to R&D. That is very, very important. And processing as well. If you look at Thailand is the largest exporter of cassava, and with market share of about $3.6 billion in 2022, compared to Nigeria, the largest producer of cassava, $180 million. They are not doing well enough. What that means is that the limitation of value adding leads to lack of competitive advantage.
Thank
so
you.
Something has to be done.
Thank you very much. We'll come back to you later if we have more time. But now let me turn to Dr. Marianne Quinn, who is the Deputy Director General, Council for Science and Industrial Research in Ghana. So you play a very important role within the national systems driving this agenda on root and tuber crops. So tell us about the significance of these crops in Western Africa, maybe starting with Ghana.
They are very important crops. These are our staple crops. They are indigenous. We hold the diversity. We hold the genetic diversity of these crops. They are part of our tradition, our festivals. They are celebrated crops within the Western Central Africa. They produce a lot of nutrients, minerals. They contribute highly to our economy. In that, women and youth, these are crops that women and youth are involved in their production and processing. So it is long overdue that we pay the necessary attention to these crops. If you take cassava, Nigeria is leading in the production, followed by Ghana. In terms of yam, Ghana is the leading exporter of yam on the international market. In 2021, we earned about $48.2 million US from the export of yams. So that is how important this crop is. Globally, it's over 200 million yam earnings on the global market. And you can say that Ghana has a big chunk of it. In Ghana, in the sub-region, there's Koraf. Koraf has regional centers of excellence. And Ghana is the regional center of excellence for RTB. And we have the stage set to network within the sub-region with the CG centers to ensure the productivity of the RTBs.
Thank you. So one more question. So if somebody gave you 20 million US dollars today, where would you start? Which are the 3 key things that you would invest in when it comes to these crops?
These crops, we are looking at import substitution, especially the cereals, because the cereals have gained so much with Green Revolution. The RTBs didn't gain that much, so it is time for RTB improvement. And with that much money, I'm going to look at increased productivity, nutrient improvement, because these crops are being used as composite flour for the confectionery industry. They are gluten-free. So if you're looking at the nutrient components, the RTBs stand. The problem we are having with the cereals, for the sake of which we spent over 10 billion US dollars importing cereals, is that our agriculture is mainly rain-fed. We have challenges with fertilizer, pesticide, we've had fall armyworm, all the challenges. So with climate change, the cereals fail. But when the cereal has failed, go and dig the ground. You'll find cassava, you'll find yam, sweet potato. You can pluck your bananas and your plantains, they will be fruiting, and you have food on your plate. So they hold the key to food security, economic empowerment for our women, for our youth, for economic enhancement. So that money is going to improve the productivity so that we'll be the net exporter of these crops.
Thank you very much. Go and dig the ground. So we have to take care of the ground so it does something. I like that a lot. So we move on now to Dr. Ashish Saxena, who is the Division Chief Input Systems at the USAID. So you're coming from the other side of digging in the pocket. Would you prioritize these root and tuber crops, or is it already been prioritized enough?
I guess when Simon, you started, you basically was reflecting some of the numbers, right? Like the study from FPRI supported by GATE. So is it better? Awesome. Thank you, David. So yes, at USAID, anything we do is based on data-driven, thinking about what's contextual, throughout the globe, where is needed, what's needed, and what's the data showing. I was thinking about, especially people from Canada, I don't know whether there is some here, but they look about the hockey and think about the puck, where it's moving, and then target where the puck is going, right? But for us, with this data, we already know where we are going. So which is easy in some sense, that where we have to target especially for the western part of Africa and a large population growth, how important is RTB? Are our investments aligned? Are these priorities? This is something actually we are very deeply working with CGIAR. I'm glad Lindy is here listening. So our investments needs to align, and how can we create those systems where, with the growing needs and growing priorities, we change our investment accordingly. And it's just not USAID. I think it's an open call for all the people who really care about the humanity and food security. So can we develop those systems? Yes. So apart from priority, I was thinking something different. I'll probably just share if I may. Yes. There are two things which comes to my mind. One is, David, I think back in Nebraska, I was just amazed. About 100 years ago, not too far, 200 miles or maybe 350 kilometers go west from here, there was one time I saw a presentation from an old corn breeder or maize breeder. He told for homestead, like roughly 160 acre, I don't know how to convert into hectares, but maybe 60, 70 hectares. A family of 4, 5, 6 people, including kids, they used to take 2 months to harvest corn on their own ground. Now with the machinery, they can do it in 2 hours barely, and then maybe 15, 20, 30 times more than in 100 years. Why does that happen? It happens because of innovation, but there are 2 other components which we sometimes talk, sometimes we don't, which is innovation, not only just on plants, but also in machinery that makes capable to do that. And then one other thing which is so profound, what will happen, think about yam, you are talking about millions of tons. How will you take from ground and give it to the consumer, to the urban areas and export out? You need roads. You need vehicles to take this huge amount of matrix, millions of tons from there to the consumer. So I think we probably need to think about food system prioritization, not just crop, because otherwise we will create more roadblocks to the way. So I would like to ask, see, how can we develop a system where we can not only grow more crops, healthy crops, more amount of things, but allow our system to take it out easily from the ground and take it to the consumer easily to the ground. If we need cold storage, that's another story. So there are huge amount of prioritization on many, many different things. I'm just sharing a few things. Thank you.
Thank you. I would still ask you one more question. More specifically, I like the system approach because you have to look at all the factors that come into play. But when it comes to RTB crops, what is the one area that should be invested in to really make these crops realize their full potential? Where would you put your money?
I would say phenotype change. The phenotype, and again, I think I'm just going to relate it back to my previous comment on machinery. The way I see the progress for our in many different countries, if you look at during the World War I and World War II, post-World War I, post-World War II, one of the big things happened throughout the globe, wherever the success was, is basically mechanization. How can we do a second way, mechanization too? And it's very, very important. Think about the first green revolution that happened. What happened to the wheat? It reduced the phenotype. It reduced the height of wheat, right? It stopped dropping or lodging, right? I'm also thinking the same thing needs to happen. The phenotypes needs to change that can make our RTB crops more amenable for mechanization. I think that's the one thing I would like to see. But this should not happen only from the breeder's perspective. This needs to be a decision. thinking about the consumer who eat the food, what they are looking, but also the agri-machinery providers, at the same time, the whole value chain. What are they looking, and how can we build a system to develop a phenotype that's really easy for breeding from the very on-site? Because these crops are not like cereal. These are very hard to breed. How can we think about the flowering, thinking about the height, thinking about the size of the crop? How can we think about, heard about the planting density? All these things. And then if we are thinking about irrigation, all these things, they're like minor things. But if you look at very specifically in the cropping context, I would say phenotyping, change the phenotype that enables or unlock the potential of RTBs in a very different way that can allow the new green revolution in RTB crops.
I like that a lot. It's really non-conventional thinking, how we think about it. So that's a really good challenge. So we'll hear from the next panelist via video link, Dr. Jim Lawrenson, who is a senior program officer at the BMGF. So please play the video.
I'm sorry that I couldn't be there in person this week. Roots Tourism Bananas, or RTBs, are projected to deliver the most benefits to smallholder farmers in sub-Saharan Africa in terms of improved livelihoods, poverty alleviation, and food security between now and 2050. In addition, they include some of the most climate resilient crops. Nevertheless, RTB crops remain heavily underinvested for breeding, seed systems, and improved management, with most of their support coming from the Gates Foundation and USAID. The RTB crops are projected to deliver more growth in sub-Saharan Africa in tons of production than all other crops combined over the next 25 years, and the actual dollar value of their growth over the same period surpasses by nearly 20% the growth of all other staple crops combined. Data from IFPRI. RTB crops are more important in sub-Saharan Africa than on any other continent. A strong hypothesis might be made that it's because they are the survivor crops that can sustain unseasonable drought that would kill most annual crops, so that they are there to take advantage of the delayed rains when they eventually come. The unpredictability of African weather will almost certainly worsen with climate change. The RTB crops provide not only food security, but also much needed income during times of food scarcity. And while their bulky, perishable nature might be considered a negative, it actually makes them less susceptible to global price shocks when war or large crop failures in multiple geographies drive up prices of global commodity crops. Much of the groundwork has been laid. Recent investments have provided information on farmer and end-user preferences for better product profiles that meet user demands. Efficient breeding systems that take advantage of genomic tools, modern biometrics, breeding databases, accelerated breeding methods, and sources of desirable traits to greatly increase rates of genetic gain. New approaches to seed systems are ready to be scaled to allow superior new varieties to gain adoption at faster scale than has been achieved before. Agronomic studies have shown that yields could be dramatically increased for cassava and banana in sub-Saharan Africa. Yams and sweet potatoes still need similar projects. Given the importance of these relatively high-value staple crops, it's a great time to muster a larger coalition of donors, governments, and financial institutions to enable RTB crops their green revolution decade with expanded breeding networks, seed systems, and tailored agronomic advice to support the continent with the biggest need for increased food supply over the next 25 years. Thank you, and have a wonderful conference.
Thank you, Dr. Jim Lawrenson, in absentia. So I'll come to my final panelists, because we've heard from people who have been supporting us, USAID, FDB, BMGF. We've heard from the national system, our partners, about the importance of these crops. We have centers represented here who have been driving this agenda within the CGIAR. So Dr. Lindiwe Sibanda, as the chair of the CGIAR System Board, I would like you to make some remarks about the vision for CGIAR about these crops and as part of the new green revolution for Africa. Yes, please, that's fine. Yeah, thank you.
It's a great honor to be in a session that is celebrating the unleashing of a new green revolution. In as much as it's an honor, it's an embarrassment. I say it's an embarrassment because I was raised on sweet potato. The only breakfast crop that I knew was sweet potato. We could go out the back of the garden in our 1-acre plot where my grandmother raised us and just dig, as my sister said, and that's your first break of the fast. You wouldn't bother about when the food will be cooked because you still had to fetch firewood, boil water, but this root was readily available as a breakfast snack and kept us going. So to be heading a center, centers that are over 50 years old, to be heading centers that are developing technologies that are already on the shelf, and we wait to say we will unleash a new green revolution is an embarrassment. So it has to happen. Thank you to our partners, the Keynote, African Development Bank. We hear you loud and clear. We need more investment. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, USAID, and our national partners. We need more investment. But as you have rightfully said, this investment is sitting with the private sector because it is predicted that over 40% of food production that we are already producing comes from these root and tuber and banana crops. And the prediction is that they will deliver nearly 200 billion in additional market value by 2050. So what are we waiting for? We witnessed the first green revolution that was driven by wheat and rice, and we know what it has done worldwide. We wake up to bread made from wheat. We also have cornbread. But can we go back to our roots and diversify the plate? Yes, we can. How are we going to do it? Let's start with the accelerators. Without women who are equipped with the technologies, we will not be able to do it because this crop is already called an orphan crop, a woman crop, and today I had survival crops. And who is better placed than our women farmers to drive that survival revolution? Let's equip them, let's bring them in the mainstream to drive this new revolution. In terms of technology, we already have a big program as CGIAR. We are the largest public-funded entity that is delivering technologies, science in the face of climate change with an aim of transforming food systems, land systems, and water systems. There's no better way of doing this than working through roots, root tubers, and bananas, because we know they also fertilize our soils. We know that they nourish the planet and they nourish people. So what have we done as CGIAR? If you forget everything that I've said, think about 853. 853 is the new portfolio that we are launching from 2025. This portfolio has 3 accelerators. What are those accelerators? Gender equality and inclusion. And that's why we're excited with the unleashing of a new green revolution. The second one is digital transformation. We will not leapfrog development, we will not leapfrog in terms of achieving 2030 goals if we do not invest in digital transformation. The third accelerator is capacity sharing. We spoke about investing in training the next generation. African Development Bank was clear that unless we train the next pipeline of scientists who are going to enjoy the foods that our generation enjoyed, we will not conquer. Unless we invest in the whole value chain, these foods will not be available on the table. We have 8 big programs, that's the 8, and Breeding for Tomorrow and Gene Banks is another powerful way in which we will deliver on this. But most important, how will you evaluate that the CGIAR has delivered on its vision? We have 5 impact areas. Number 1, nutrition, health, and food security. You can already tick the RTB contribution. Number 2, poverty reduction, livelihoods and jobs, vast opportunity in the value chain. I see Jane Lowe, please go back to your orange dresses because they brightened the room and reminded us of what RTBs can do. Number 3, environmental health and biodiversity. RTBs contribute to that. Gender equality, youth and social inclusion is number 4. And number 5, climate adaptation and mitigation. 8 programs with 3 accelerators and 5 impact areas is what we are promising. But what we need is more investment. We are currently at less than 1 billion. We are aiming for 4 billion. So join us in our campaign, because without that additional resource, we will not be able to deliver on our promise. As CGIAR, collectively, as one CGIAR, across all our centers, we are promising that we will deliver collectively into unleashing this new green revolution that will expand our basket, our pantries, diversify our diets, and make sure we feed the planet, but most important, feed people. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lindiwe. Can you imagine we ate into a Q&A session? So I really will ask for your apologies that I won't get time to indulge the floor, and ask Dr. Simeon Ehue, who is the Director General for IATA, to just come and give us some closing remarks of what he heard throughout the session. Thank you, Dr. Simeon.
Sorry about that you are not able to ask questions. We started with Simon, we end with Simeon. This is how SIP and IITA are coordinating. So as we wrap up our discussion, it seemed really fitting to say that the food security, the future of food security in Africa is firmly rooted into tuber, into banana, root, and tuber, basically. That's what it means. So we are really digging, I would say, into making a difference, okay? One tuber at a time, okay? So RTB, basically, that's what it says, okay? So I think I will just go ahead and, reaffirm what has been said earlier. We heard that how root, tuber, and banana crops, RTBs, can truly drive a green revolution in Africa. And these crops, like cassava, yam, sweet potato, and bananas, are not only dietary staples for millions, but also hold immense potential for food security, resilience to climate change, and also the livelihoods of millions of people in rural communities in Africa. Let's put it in perspective, and as I think Simon mentioned earlier, RTB crops are projected to generate an additional 190 billion in market value by 2050. That's a huge amount of money. And that's more than maize, rice, together, even including meat. I apologize, Apollinaire, but it's really showing, the value of root and tuber in the years, to come. So innovations are quite important and are really making a difference. For example, the cassava, thrives into drought and high temperature, where other staples often fail. And its commercialization has driven industrial applications. And we have heard examples from Nigeria and Ghana, which is quite impressive. So the commercialization has driven industrial application, like using cassava flour to reduce wheat import, like in Nigeria, where you can actually make bread with a combination of cassava flour, with wheat flour, up to 30%. And it is supporting local farmers and saving foreign exchange in Nigeria. Same thing for yam, for example, where recent breeding breakthroughs have shortened the crop cycles, resulting into more resilient, high-yielding varieties. So across RTB crops, breeding is advancing with genomic selection, faster flowering, and digital data. These tools help us respond quickly to farmers' needs and diverse environments. As climate change impact agriculture, the RTB crops stand out for their resilience, and we need to recognize that. With drought-tolerant varieties and adaptability to marginal soils, they provide a crucial food security buffer for vulnerable communities. So, colleagues, in closing, ensuring food security in Africa is about more than production. It's about fostering sustainable systems that uplift communities. Through partnerships with the government, NGOs, the private sector, and local communities, we can strengthen the future of RTB crops and secure a more resilient, food secure Africa. So, thank you all for your dedication and commitment. Let us carry these insights forward and take the steps needed to make this vision a reality for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ehui. Yep. Please join me to thank all my speakers and my panelists. Please give them a round of applause. And thanks to you also for engaging us. It was such an enjoyable session. I wish we had more time, but I'll thank you for now. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. We just